Welcome to Coco's Connection, the podcast where we deep dive into inspiring stories, real conversations, and the connections that shape our lives. I'm your host, Coco, and each week we'll explore the people, ideas, and experiences that help us grow and connect in meaningful ways. Thanks for tuning in, and let's get connected. Welcome back to Coco's Connection. I'm your host, Coco, and today we're diving into a topic that impacts all of us, and that's conflict. And so, how do we handle it in a way that strengthens our relationships instead of tearing them apart? The title of this podcast is Navigating Conflict in a Healthy Way: Connection Strategies. In this episode, we'll explore practical strategies for navigating conflict in a healthy way, staying connected even in disagreements, and fostering deeper understanding. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Now, let's get into it. And as you know, I love to give my verse of the week. And the verse that we're going to read from is John chapter 13, verses 14, or verses 34. Sorry, guys. It says, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another." And so, as we talk about conflict and we talk about disagreements and everything, the focus is to know that we must love one another in spite of the conflict. And that's what Jesus wants us to do. So as we dive into this, I want you to just keep that in the back of your mind to know that, hey, regardless of any type of conflict that I'm facing, I must love. And so the first, we're going to just talk about understanding conflict. And there are a lot of reasons why conflicts happen. So I'm just going to give you a few. So the top reason a lot of conflicts may happen is miscommunication. There are, whether it's work, it's your relationships at home with your spouse, family. Um, Miscommunication is a big thing that people tend to allow that disconnect to happen. And so another factor is unmet needs. That miscommunication still ties into the unmet needs, where something that you need, and that's part of connection. You may tell your spouse, "Hey, I really want you to pick up more date nights," and they don't. And so that could be a reason conflict may arise. Another reason is personal triggers, something that may have happened in your past, personal trauma, those types of things that can trigger that conflict. And then finally, external stressors, situations that may happen at work, a project that completely got erased, something can truly, that is beyond your control, that can allow those conflicts to happen, and they will affect your entire day. So, we're going to talk about healthy versus unhealthy conflict. So, we're going to talk about constructive conversations versus destructive arguments. And so, we're going to first talk about constructive conversations. And the goal of this constructive conversation is to understand and to find a solution. The tone is typically calm and respectful and open. The listening style is active listening with the intent of understanding. And the language that's used in it is typically, "I feel, I understand, can we find a solution?" And focus is the issue at hand, it's not personal attacks. And so ultimately, the outcome is wanting both people to feel heard, and a resolution is definitely possible. And so we're going to talk about the destructive arguments. That goal is to win or to prove the other person is wrong. The tone that's set is defensive, aggressive, or even dismissive. And so the listening style is they're interrupting, tuning out, or preparing just for a counterattack. The language that's used in that is you always, you never, it's your fault. And so the focus more is on blaming and criticizing or bringing up past mistakes. So that outcome typically both parties feel frustrated, hurt, and definitely disconnected. So when you think about examples of constructive conversation, I'm going to give you a scenario today. So it's your partner is spending a lot of time at work and you feel like they're not making enough time for you. So a healthy approach would be to reconnect with them. Is lately I've been feeling a little disconnected because we haven't had much quality time together. I miss you. Can we plan a date night just for us this week? And the reason why this works is because you're expressing your feelings without blaming them and you're suggesting a solution. And so I'm going to give you another one that was literally today. So, as we were heading to the store, me and my husband were heading to the store, and he was kind of feeling like he sounded a little aggravated in his tone. And I'm like, what is wrong? And, what am I doing wrong or something like that? And he was just like, I don't know what it is, but I just feel like I'm, I just don't feel like myself, and I don't know what's going on, and maybe it's just lack of sleep, but I feel a little off and like confrontational. And so I was like, well, I'm so sorry. And he was like, it's nothing that you've done. It's nothing that you could have said or you're contributing to. And I think a lot of times when we hear that, it's like, that's the type of constructive conversations that we need. Um, and what helped our resolution was prayer. Sometimes they just need prayer. Someone, if they're going through something, again, that's part of the external stressors that could happen in their life. And we could just not be a part of that, but it is a real life situation. And so prayer is so important and prayer is powerful because it helps us when we don't see the whole picture. God can help us and allow that conflict to de-escalate. And so I'm going to give you an example of a destructive argument, which definitely I feel like we've all been at one point in our life. So this scenario is the same approach of your partner spending a lot of time at work and they don't feel and you feel like they aren't making enough time for you. So we're going to go back to that. And so the destructive approach is you never make time for me. Clearly, work is more important to you than I am. And then they're responding back because they're on the defensive side now. Is saying that's not true. You're always complaining. You should be more appreciative of how hard I work. And so the reason this doesn't work because it turns into a blame game, and it definitely leads to defensiveness and resentment instead of an actual solution. And so if you find yourself in that type of destructive conflict in that conversation, how do you shift into a constructive conversation? And so I'm going to give you some practical tips that I know that has helped me in the past of a heated argument. And let's be real, sometimes it may just be because as some women, like I know for myself, I PMS, and as we get older, we're like, what is going on with life? And it's like, ugh, and you're already irritated with the kids may have done something. And so how do you truly shift that mindset from that destructive conflict to that constructive conversation? The first step is taking a pause. If your emotions are running high, you can say, let's take a break and we'll come back when we're calmer. And I have said, I apologize. This conversation isn't going anywhere. We're just hollering and get mad at each other. Let's just kind of take a break and reset. Now, if they just want to keep arguing, then that's literally when you walk out and step into the other room. And so instead of, so this, that'll actually help just de escalate. And then another step is use I statements instead of you never listen. Try, I feel unheard when I'm interrupted. I feel as though my my feelings aren't put into consideration when um, you don't listen, or you don't, complete the task that I've asked you to do. So, and that just comes with, even with your child. Like, I feel like I'm being unheard because you're not um, doing what I ask you to do. And that'll like even allow you to see, hey, maybe I just need to take a break and step back and see if I'm not being so too aggressive in that situation. And then another step is staying solution focused. Instead of rehashing old issues, bringing up the past, ask, how can we fix this moving forward? A lot of times when we are in that conflict, we can bring up those, well, you did this 2 days ago and you're going to do, you're basically saying, hey, you're going to do this again. So I don't care. And that considers, um, that's not considerate, and it doesn't show those feelings of, hey, I really want to find a solution. It's more so that it's destructive, and you're saying, I don't really care. You're going to do this, and I'm just already declaring it, because even as believers, we say in Proverbs 20, 21, 18, it says, death and life is in the power of our tongue, and if they that love it will eat their fruit. So when we're declaring, oh, well, you're going to do this again, that's what you're saying. And that's what you're declaring, instead of saying, how can we fix this? We need to find a solution to move forward. So we have to look at that in the scenarios of focused. We want a solution focus. It's not, it's never a time to just rehash old feelings, unless it's a situation where the conflict, it's affecting, the past is affecting your current situation. And a lot of times, even with that, we want to say, how can we, again, how can we move forward and not allow this to happen again? In another situation, so we can have that destructive conflict turn into constructive conversation, is to listen to understand. Repeat back what the other person is saying, and to make sure that you understand their perspective. So many times we're just so focused on our perspective. It's to listen really means to see their perspective as well. And finally, set boundaries. If the conversation turns toxic, it's okay. Like I said previously, it's okay to walk away and revisit later. Because the goal is, even in this destructive conversation to constructive conflict, conflict itself is not bad. It's just how we handle it that matters. A disagreement can actually bring people closer through understanding, and or it can push them apart through resentment. So that choice is really up to you. And so we want to reframing conflict and seeing it as an opportunity for growth instead of something to avoid. Because a lot of times, when I know, even growing up, conflict, even if it was the smallest thing, I was afraid of that, because I was just like, it made me feel uncomfortable. And that's another way to connect. We have to know that every person isn't the same. But that conflict, again, it helps us grow into the person, and the person that Christ wants us to be. And so as we continue to deep dive into conflict, we I'm going to talk about how connection strategies for healthy conflict resolutions. We're going to just talk about, again, the key is active listening through this whole dynamics of that conflicts. And so when we think about it, listening to understand, not just to respond, using phrases like "I hear what you're saying" is. And so reminding yourselves as we're having those conversations in the midst of the argument, we're focused in on what they're saying and not just focused based on how I'm feeling. So number 2 is just emotional regulation. Take a pause, deep breath, and self-soothing before reacting, because a lot of times we're so quick to react and say, this is why I'm so angry and you're not doing this. And you know, it's okay to take a pause. It's okay to take a deep breath. And a lot of times, even as that's why I'm teaching my daughter, it's okay to be upset and those emotions are valid. But we have to learn how to self regulate. And again, self control is the fruit of the spirit, guys. I think a lot of times people just think self control as eating or self control as, just being quiet. But it's not always just about being quiet, it's about listening, it's about emotional regulation. Self control is saying, asking God to take control of this situation. That's where I said prayer changes things. He can take control of that conflict, in the middle of that conflict, and turn it around into something good, because we know that Romans 8:28 says, all things work together for the good of those who are the called according to his purpose. And that negative situation with the conflict can be turned into something that is positive. And the third thing is again with the I statements, expressing feelings without blame. I feel unheard instead of you never listen. Number 4, finding common ground, shifting from me versus you versus, um, so you go from me versus you to us versus the problem. So you're finding common ground in that and saying we're collectively and we're going to connect in this to work through the problem, because you will go through it. That's the thing with conflict. And number 5 is agreeing to disagree when compromise isn't possible. Just the key is maintaining respect and connection. So it may not seem as though things are going your way, but we want to know and we got to understand that we have to maintain respect, and keep that connection. So now we're going to actually talk about some real life scenarios and solutions. And so this first scenario is a disagreement with a friend or a partner. It says, let's say you and your best friend have made weekend plans, but at the last minute they cancel again. You feel frustrated and unimportant, while they feel overwhelmed with other responsibilities. So we're going to deep dive into see how to handle it in a healthy way. So step 1, before reacting, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I feeling? What do I need right now? Instead of immediately texting and say, wow, you always do this, take a moment to calm down. Pray and say, Lord, what do you want me to say, and respond in this text? Because I can say from personal experience, life be lifing. And it is hard to have to cancel. And I'm saying on my part, where you don't really want to cancel, you want to, hang out, but it's like life be lifing. So how do you handle that? So we're going to go to step 2. Use I statements instead of blame. So instead of you never make time for me, tell them I feel hurt when plans change last minute because I was really looking forward to spending time together. This keeps the conversation open instead of defensive. It allows them to express to you and open up and let you know what's going on in their lives, because a lot of times that builds that deeper connection. Step three is listening to their perspective. Maybe your friend is struggling with personal stress or exhaustion. Ask if everything is okay. I've noticed you've been canceling plans a lot. Giving them space to explain fosters that deep connection, like I was saying. No matter what you're facing, I think a lot of times life is hard right now, and there's a lot of things that are going on. And even as we get older, our friendships, we want them to deepen and we want them to connect and we want to have meaningful relationships. But we can get busy with life, and so we have to try to find that connection. So, which leads us to step four, finding a solution together. Maybe they need more flexible plans, or you set clearer expectations next time. So the compromise could be, what if would it help if I we set a backup plan, so things if things change, we can still find time to connect. So it could just be um asking them to help keep them accountable and keep that reminder going. And then so step five, keep the bigger picture in mind. Ask yourself, is this a pattern or a one-time thing? Not every conflict needs a big resolution. Sometimes a little understanding goes a long way. The main takeaway that I want you to understand, doesn't have to push people apart. Handled correctly, it can actually strengthen your relationships. So, the scenario two is just a conflict at work, speaking up without burning bridges. So, imagine this, you're at work. You've been working hard on a project, but your coworker takes credit for your ideas in a meeting. You feel frustrated and undervalued. How do you handle this professionally while maintaining a good working relationship? So, first off, you pause, process your emotions again. Your first reaction might be anger or frustration, but before you responding, just take a moment, ask yourself, what do I want to achieve? Do I want to call them out or do I want recognition and fairness? Step two, address it privately and professionally. So instead of calling them out in front of everyone, schedule a quick conversation. To give you an example, it's like, hey, Susan, I noticed in a meeting that there are some ideas I shared earlier that were mentioned, but I wasn't acknowledged. I want to make sure we're both getting credit for our contributions. And then step three is use facts, not feeling. Avoid accusations like you stole my idea. Instead, when presented those concepts last week, I was excited about our collaboration. Moving forward, I'd love for both of us to be recognized for our contributions. And then if it's like a continuous pattern, loop in a manager. If the behavior is a pattern, document instances and approach your supervisor professionally. A quick example is, I value teamwork, but I've noticed my contributions are being overlooked. I'd love to discuss how we can ensure fair credit in future projects. And finally, focusing on the bigger picture in the workplace, maintaining relationships is key. Keep your tone solution orientated and not confrontational. Ask yourself what resolution strengthens collaboration rather than causing division. So, the main takeaway from this scenario is standing up for yourself at work is important, but how you do it, it makes all the difference. Professionalism and clear communications equal a stronger team dynamics. And then the final scenario today is just navigating online disagreements without losing your cool. So this scenario is you post something on social media, maybe an opinion or a personal story or even just a meme, and suddenly someone leaves a heated comment disagreeing with you. Your instincts might be to clap back, but let's talk about a healthier approach. And we all been there. Again, first step is take a pause. You know, ask yourself, is this worth really engaging with? What's your goal? Is it proving a point, or having a meaningful discussion? Um, and if it's just trolling, sometimes the best response is no response. And then step two is just assume positive intent when possible. Instead of jumping to conclusions, consider that the person might not mean harm. Uh, if someone says, I totally disagree with you, that's ridiculous, you could reply and say, I see where you're coming from. Here's my perspective. This keeps the conversation open instead of defensive. Step three, set boundaries for respectful dialogue. If someone is being rude or dismissive, set a clear boundary and say, I'm open to discussing different perspectives, but let's keep it respectful. If that person continues to be aggressive, it's okay to disengage. And then number four is know when to walk away. Not every argument needs a response. If a discussion is going in circles, you can say, I appreciate your perspective. Let's agree to disagree. And we have to do that. Muting, blocking, or stepping away sometimes is the healthiest choice. Sometimes they just don't want to connect. And step five, leading with kindness and understanding. The way you respond reflects more on you than the other person. Ending with a thoughtful response, even when you disagree, can inspire more productivity and cause the conversations to be more productive. So the main takeaway is not every disagreement needs to turn into a battle. Pausing, setting boundaries, and choosing kindness can make online spaces healthier. And I've seen that as well. Sometimes, again, you don't have to agree. You can uh, agree to disagree and actually not even respond. So I am so excited for you guys to take these tips home. And if you found it helpful, please leave a comment, share with someone who needs to hear this, and share me something inspiring this week that you've had about communication and connections. Share in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you guys next week, and stay connected with one another. And I love you all. Hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.